I think that we've gotten really disconnected from what it means to be human, which is a very messy, imperfect, uncomfortable experience that is riddled with immense joy, but also immense pain and suffering and hope and playfulness and all of these things. I think that when we start to dim that which doesn't feel comfortable, we're also dimming the joy of life.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. Today's guest is someone I admire for her fierce advocacy, her grounded presence, and the incredibly powerful work she's doing in the world of trauma recovery. Brittany Piper is an internationally renowned speaker, somatic experiencing practitioner, author, and expert in sexual violence prevention and trauma-informed care. Over the past 13 years, she's delivered over 400 programs across 3 continents and worked with the U.S. Army, Department of Justice, and sex crimes detectives to provide trauma-informed trainings. She's also the creator of At Heal with Brit and founder of the internationally acclaimed Body First Healing Program, a nervous system-centered approach to healing trauma. In our conversation, Brittany shares both personal stories and practical tools from her journey as a survivor and a leader in the trauma recovery field. We explore what it really takes to rebuild self-trust after trauma, how to regulate and become more embodied when stepping into visibility, and why true healing has to begin in the body, not just the mind. She also shares insights from her newly released book, Body First Healing, a revolutionary guide to nervous system recovery, which offers a compassionate, science-backed roadmap for reclaiming your life from survival mode. This is a powerful episode filled with grounded wisdom, deep resonance, and so much heart. I'm truly honored to share Britt's voice with you. Let's get into it. Britt, welcome to the podcast. It's so lovely to finally meet you and get to chat with you. I can't wait to learn more about you. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
I am too. Just to get us started, for listeners who are new to your work, what is it that you do and who is your work for? Who does it help?
Yeah, I think I could start with the technical term of what I do and get into the resume speak, but maybe I'll just give a bit of a mission statement first. So the mission behind the work that I do is helping people to return to the parts of them that were maybe lost before trauma, returning home. And I do that in a number of different ways. So somatic experiencing is one of the modalities that I'm professionally trained in. So I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner. And I would say that's kind of the bread and the butter, the meat and potatoes, not the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes of what I do. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about because it's a modality that really had such a profound impact on my own healing. But then I also do a blend of other modalities as well. So I specialize in somatic attachment therapy, somatic internal family systems, polyvagal theory. So I work as a practitioner in group and one-on-one settings. And then outside of that, I've also been a trauma educator since 2012. So I work a lot with the United States military,
Yeah.
with the Department of Justice, violent crimes units, and quite a bit with colleges and universities as well to provide trauma informed information, trauma informed training, and forensic training to help people to understand how trauma impacts survivors and how it lives within the body and the multitude of ways that we can heal.
It's such important work, and it's really interesting to hear, like, the diversity of populations that you speak to who need the message that you're sharing. You and I share that the SE training, the somatic experiencing, that was also my entry point into, I guess, my own healing, and then
Yeah.
it was I like you, I liked it so much, I wanted to study it. Um, and I'd love to hear in as much or little detail as you'd like to share today, what led you to this work? Because, I know a bit of your story from, your book, which we'll talk about in a moment, but even beyond that, I think most of us don't come into this work if it's not through some
Mhm.
kind of personal healing experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I always say, and I'm curious if the case is for you too, but I always say that my professional research started off as me search.
Totally. Oh, completely. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
self as the science experiment, if you wanna call it that.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, my own personal recovery was certainly informed and transformed by turning inward to the body and recognizing that I had a lot of the answers to my healing that I had been looking for outside of myself.
yeah,
And so up until my early 20s, I had been kind of on the traditional route of healing and recovery. I had experienced the loss of my brother when we were in high school. He passed away in a car accident. And I think that was kind of the first glaring or in your face kind of trauma that I recognized, I was experiencing. And I come from a family where we throw everything under the rug. You kind of push on,
yeah,
you keep it going. And I think a lot of people kind of grew up in dynamics and households like that. And so, but I've realized over time that avoiding isn't the same thing as healing and that eventually you have to face it. And I learned that in some really difficult ways. So, my healing was not pretty by any means. I don't think for anyone it is, but I ended up in a jail cell because of an alcohol related incident. I ended up in a hospital bed because of alcohol. And so I was just on kind of this really destructive path for many years. And it wasn't until I started seeing a somatic therapist at the direction of my traditional therapist
okay.
that I really started to see the needle move.
Yeah,
And it didn't take all that long actually for my life to change pretty quickly. And it was interesting because it was such gentle work and compared to being thrown into the deep end of trauma, which is what I was so used to doing for all those years in therapy. And then when I was 20, I was also sexually assaulted by a stranger who helped me change my flat tire. And after a 2-year, pretty grueling trial process, he was convicted and sentenced to 60 years. And it was around that time that I ended up in the jail cell, that I was really in the deep end of my healing. And that was when it was suggested to me, maybe start seeing a somatic therapist. And things really started to change pretty quickly. And then I was like, wow, why doesn't everyone else know about this? I became a bit of a sponge. I'm a bit of a nerd. So I started reading all of Peter Levine's books and
yeah,
just a lot of the science books on trauma that weren't really mainstream and weren't really being talked about in mainstream medical communities. And I was really curious about that. Why aren't we talking about this more? And so that was, yeah, 2012 is around when that happened, that I started to enter into this work from a personal, experience. And Yeah, now I would say the past since then, the past 10 years is where I've really started to take it on as a profession.
Yeah.
It still changes my life every day.
It's interesting. Thank you so much for sharing these parts of your story with me and with the listeners. It's really an honor to hold space. Um, it's interesting to hear how you found somatic therapy. It was a question I was going to ask. How did you find it? Because I know you've been doing this work for a while. You've been steeped in it for a while. These days, you see the word somatic all over social media and other
Yeah.
places, and it's really picked up attention, but it hasn't been in the public vocabulary for all that long.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's interesting to hear that I guess, more traditional therapist you were seeing even knew about this. And I'm curious if you because I think it was a foreign concept to most people. Um, did you have any, like, resistance to it at first? Were you immediately on board? What was that like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I should give some context into how she came to that conclusion that I should
Yeah.
seek a somatic therapist. So, I know I previously mentioned I had experienced that assault, and that was in 2009 at the age of 20. And then in 2011 is when the trial happened. And so there was a 2-year period. And during that time, I was probably at the worst point in my life. I mean, lowest point in my life. I have a background in women's studies with concentrations in gender based violence and violence prevention. So I do a lot of sexual violence prevention education work. And I've been doing that since 2012. But um, in what we often see is that when victims or survivors of violent crimes have overwhelming evidence against a perpetrator, that something happened here that was clearly wrong, and so, therefore, the defense team doesn't have a leg to stand on. Their only strategy to use is to try to emotionally wear down the victim in the judicial process
Yeah.
with the hopes that they'll drop the charges. And so that's what I faced over that 2-year period. My trial was postponed or continued. And again, this was strategic 9 times. And so every
Oh,
time that happens, a survivor is faced to kind of go through like what I consider a dress rehearsal for
yeah.
trial. You not only do you have the anticipation and the anxiety and the terror of I am going to see this person in the flesh, but you're also faced to sit through your depositions again, practice being on the witness stand, listen to your tape statements, and it's incredibly re-traumatizing. And so I did that 9 times over a 2-year period, which put me in a very dissociative state. And when I wasn't dissociating, um, I was drinking
Yeah.
to help myself become numb. And when I would drink, I would get into these very violent and angry kind of episodes, which was really not in my nature. Very different than
Yeah.
how how I traditionally was. And so I was confused about that. The people around me were confused about that. But knowing what I know now, that
Yeah.
was my nervous system trying to replay and complete and survive the assault in the way that it couldn't do at the time. So I had actually tried to fight back when the assault happened, but I was overpowered. And so my nervous system got stuck in this stress response.
Yeah.
And so the jail cell experience, my perpetrator was sentenced, he was convicted, and he was sentenced to 60 years. And I think I always assumed that when he gets sentenced and convicted, I'll be better. Everything will
Mm,
go back to normal. And that's not at all what happened.
yeah. Yeah.
Because now that he's behind bars for as long as I know he's going to be, my nervous system, I think, was kind of like, oh, we can breathe a little bit. But when that
Mhm.
happens, kind of start to thaw out. And that which has been dissociated from the body really starts to emerge. And so I became incredibly just unraveled. And it was less than 30 days after his sentencing that I found myself in a jail cell. And this is where my therapist comes in. So I was out with my boyfriend who was drinking and driving. And I always say that's a really good indication of where I was at that point in my life.
Yeah.
He gets pulled over and arrested, and when the police officers went to physically pull me out of the car to give me a ride home, in my impaired state, I had also been drinking, I had a flashback of the night of my assault, and what I can conceive is that I went back into a trauma reenactment of trying to fight back. So, of a stranger, of a man touching me in a car. So
Yeah.
I ended up in a jail cell with 2 counts of battery on an officer with injury. But I was in that jail cell for a couple of days. My parents didn't bail me out because tough love, is a
Mm.
thing. And it was in that 2 to 3 days that I experienced somatically in my body what I would consider to look almost like a drug withdrawal.
Yeah.
Intense trembling, sweating profusely, tears that felt decades old,
Yeah.
just a lot of stuff that was really being expressed and kind of expelled through the body. And I remember leaving the jail feeling different in my body, like just very different. I felt different in my posture. My center of gravity felt different. The weight of my body felt different. I felt like I could breathe differently.
Mm.
And so I remember telling my therapist that. And that's when she said, I wonder if you should work with someone. And this wasn't just work with someone who's a somatic therapist. Of course, it was maybe also you should do some somatic therapy. So that's what prompted her
Mm.
direction, was that awareness that something happened to me in that jail cell. And not only that, I worked with a practitioner who was trained at the Polyvagal Institute. So that's actually where my work started as a professional in this space, was as a polyvagal practitioner, which we know is blended quite a bit with SE work.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of nervous system work, as well as, kind of cognitive work as well. And then I started to tiptoe into SE work, and yeah, things really unfolded from there.
A quick pause here because I want to invite you into something that I think could shift the way you feel about showing up. If you're a sensitive creative or entrepreneur, and the idea of being really seen and heard brings up fear, resistance, or that, oh no, not me feeling, you are in good company. My free visibility workshop, Let Yourself Be Seen, is all about making visibility feel safe to your nervous system and true to you. We'll explore how to work with fear as a doorway into more authentic self expression so you can share the work that matters most to you without pushing, pretending, or burning out. You can save your spot or catch the replay at annaholtzman.com/be seen. Okay, let's get back to the conversation. Again, thank you so much for sharing those details and the visceral experience of it, because I think that so many listeners, whether their life experiences are similar or ve- potentially very different, there's something about what you described that I think everyone can understand in some way on a felt level. And it's so interesting how this phenomenon happens, that when we experience something that's too overwhelming to process and our environment isn't safe enough for us to process in, when when circumstances shift so that things feel a bit safer, that's when we unravel.
Yeah.
And the unraveling is so necessary, but we really need guidance and care and someone to orient us to what's happening. Otherwise, it can feel so out of control and dangerous.
Yeah, it's like organized chaos. That unraveling needed some containment.
Yeah.
I needed help and support to contain that, because it was just it was too much. And then in the jail cell, because I didn't have, alcohol to reach to, or crappy relationship to,
Right.
put all of this to fuel my stress. I didn't have these distractions or forms of escape. It was just me, body, nervous system, and
Mm.
all of the stuff that I'd been running from for so long. Um, and so I think that there was a certain amount of surrendering that happened there, which
Yeah.
provided a very uncomfortable but also incredibly transformative experience. And, sometimes I think that healing does happen in these moments of more catharsis, but more often than not, I think it's important to state this. it happens in the small moments of release and letting go that feel tolerable. I think that my system was just pushed past the edge and was like, we're done carrying this.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, you hear both kinds of stories, I think, like, there are themes that are just so human and universal,
Yeah.
like that experience of surrender because there's just, like, nothing left to fight with, internally or externally,
Yeah.
and then, yeah, sometimes we will have a big what feels like a big breakthrough in that way, but then there's this gentler process that needs to unfold from there.
Yeah, I love that you just said unfold because I was going to say the unfolding during, but also after. I think there is a bit of a mental unfolding that happens
Yeah.
in the aftermath of moments like that because it I think it helps you to observe yourself and observe the body's innate ability and capacity to do what it's always known how to do, you know? And so there was this certain amount of like awe and reverence that I had for, and that's where it came about. And I'm feeling even just like some self admiration now for my body and how much it carried. But it's a very hopeful feeling of, oh my gosh, I think I've had the answers all along, right?
Yeah, and that, like, innate wisdom of the body, it's
Yeah.
so counter to how
Mm.
most of us were raised and taught and, like, the medical model and,
Yeah.
some doctor knows what your body's supposed to do better than you do or than your body itself does.
Mhm.
It's like, really a revelation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that goes back to the mission, you know, I don't, some people often refer to, you know, people who work in the space or practitioners or therapists or Reiki or body workers or breath work, and they use this category of healer, and, um, I believe that that is categorically false because I
Yeah,
believe that we
agreed.
are our own best healer. And so the mission of allowing people again to turn inward and recognize that they've had the answers, that home is where the healing is. Not, and it's not necessarily found outside of ourselves. And yes, there are things outside of ourselves that can help to posture us in a way and give support and give witnessing and to help again the nervous system to contain when it doesn't feel like it can. You know,
Yeah,
those are certainly helpful legs to support us, but the core of healing is really it's this internal thing that happens. Um, and I it's also not lost on me that when I was forced to slow down in stillness in this jail cell, I mean, I was kind of in this jail of my own making, you know.
yeah.
And when I was forced to really sit with it, maybe not in it, but maybe sit with it, that the natural unfolding started to happen. And I think that a lot of us, when it gets to comes to healing, what I see, and I'm not sure if you see this, is like a lot of white knuckling and
Mhm.
like trying to force healing and put pressure on a system that's already overwhelmed. And sometimes that slowing down and the stillness, that's actually where most of the work can really happen. Some of the most deep work can happen, I feel like.
So you wrote a book that came out recently, this
Mhm.
gorgeous book, Body First Healing: Get Unstuck and Recover from Trauma with Somatic Healing. And I love that, like, the work that you do is so, related to everything we explore here on this podcast, even though we cover lots of different topics. It's all about, um, learning or relearning to trust yourself,
Mm.
and I know that's a big part of your work and a big part of this book, and I'm curious if you'd like to speak about what are some of the specific tools, techniques, concepts that have been most instrumental in that process for you? What can readers, look forward to learning and exploring through this book that you've written?
Yeah. So, I think that just kind of going back to my putting my polyvagal hat on for a minute. So, polyvagal theory was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, and he developed his framework in the 90s. And then the wonderful Deb Dana, psychotherapist, she took his research, and she translated it into therapy language, therapeutic language that we can easily understand. And so in the polyvagal world, we often refer to the three essential elements of the nervous system, which is the three C's. And that is choice, connection, and context. And a lot of the book that I feel like will help people first to lean into that self trust is that context piece. And this is really similar to how I created the Body First Healing program. So I have a somatic healing program, which is what a lot of the book is based off of, that I created back in 2017. And it's really a blend of all of those modalities that I mentioned at the beginning. But it starts off with a lot of psychoeducation, helping people to understand themselves better, to have context, to have clarity. And when you start to learn the science of your nervous system, of your brain, of your body, when you learn the science of trauma, when you learn the science of body memory versus, verbal memory,
Yeah.
you begin to recognize that, oh, I'm not broken. My symptoms actually make perfect sense. My reactions make perfect sense. How I feel in my body makes perfect sense. How I show up in relationships. Everything makes perfect sense based on my past experiences. And so I think it really challenges this notion that a lot of us carry, that we're broken and that we're flawed, or that we're in need of fixing, which creates this internal warring against ourselves,
Yeah.
which we know then just creates more nervous system dysregulation. So I think that the educational component is the first half of the book. There's part 1 and part 2. And part 1 is a lot of that science. It's helping you to better understand from a contextual perspective yourself, so that you can start to trust, oh, not only do I know what to do, not only do I have the answers, but my body has always known what to do. And it's been doing right by me the entire time, right? It's not working against me, it's working for me. And then the second half of the book is then the experiential process. And we know, as somatic experiencing practitioners, that the really only effective way to regulate the nervous system is not to be educated about it, it's not to learn about it, it's not to have this cognitive understanding of it, but it's to create new experiences for the nervous system where there's a felt sense of safety, where there's a moment where we can move into activation and be with this healthy aggression, this healthy fight response, and set a boundary and know that, oh, my nervous system isn't going to get overwhelmed, or it'll be met with understanding, it will be honored, where we can lean into a moment of, oh, I feel like I'm dissociating, I'm leaving, but I know that I'm going to come back here soon. And so the experiential process is more so building that nervous system muscle. And it's the somatic experiencing roadmaps in part 2, where people can start to put, what they've learned about the nervous system into practice by then learning about their nervous system, which are two very different things. So, yeah, that's I would say. And then that of course, I don't want to say it seals the deal, but when you start to experience your nervous system and observe the ways in which it can work and the deep capacity it has to help you not just manage, but process really difficult and challenging moments, and be like, wow, I just did that thing and I'm okay. And I didn't shut down, or I didn't run away. It's
Yeah.
that experience that I always say creates then evidence for the nervous system, that you can have different choices. Again, context, choice, connection. And then that creates over time new expectations, these autonomic expectations that when I set a boundary, or when I start to feel my heart racing and I'm feeling heated, I know that I can set a boundary. So yeah, those, which then builds that self-trust.
Yeah, I so appreciate the way that you describe that all and how clear it is, and how you use, you use the scientific terms or the therapy terms, but you bring it into everyday language, which I think is so grounding for our nervous systems.
Yeah.
It's like orienting. And I found it really interesting to hear how you were talking about the importance of being able to contextualize your experience, like that white knuckling that we do that you spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
Like we often just, like, we want to fix the problem, But when we're seeing ourselves as a problem, like you
Mm.
said, it's like we're chasing our tail and being frightened of our own tail, chasing it in circles. And there is the work to be done, but it is incredible to see and to experience just how much of the healing process happens simply by being able to say to someone like, am I crazy? Am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? And to hear like, no, here's why everything that's going on with you makes sense.
Yeah, I think that it's beautiful the way that you said that. I think it kind of speaks to the world that we live in today where everything is so information is so accessible, right?
Yeah.
Which is such a good thing and so helpful in so many ways. There's so many benefits to that, but in other ways, I think it's so easy for us to just pathologize ourselves and to mark it off as, oh, I just got this, and this is wrong with me, and this is wrong with me. And I think that we've gotten really disconnected from what it means to be human, which is a very messy, imperfect, uncomfortable experience that is riddled with immense joy, but also immense pain, and suffering and hope and playfulness and all of these things. I think that when we start to dim that which doesn't feel comfortable, we're also dimming the joy of life, right?
Yeah.
We can't just pick and choose um, what we feel, and so I think that yeah, I'm kind of talking in the clouds right now, but that's just really the space that I've been in lately. Is just recognizing that I think we're really disconnected from our humanness, and when I see all the content on nervous system regulation and somatic practices, which is so wonderful to see because for so long I think people were again shouting it from the rooftops and feeling like they're screaming it into the void and no one is listening. I mean,
Yeah.
nervous system work, somatic work, it's so powerful. And now it's kind of this runaway train. Everyone is talking about it, but it's turning into just another thing on the list to do.
Yeah.
How many vagus nerve practices did I do this morning? And was I able to put my feet in the ground? And how much sunshine did I get? And did I drink my mineral water before I drank my coffee? And did I get it's just, again, it's this constant merry-go-round of fixing and not realizing that we have the answers if we just slow down and stop putting so much pressure on. So, anyways,
Totally.
yeah.
I this is a silly metaphor, but I like to think of it. There's this like turducken of self-criticism, It's like,
Yes.
oh,
Oh,
like
the
the way my
turducken.
body's responding is wrong, but oh, maybe it's not wrong, but I need to use somatic practices, or I'm not doing them right, and it's like the
Mhm.
layers can just keep growing out.
Yeah. Well, and that's why in the book, I do provide somatic practices. And I'll just speak very transparently here. When my book first came out at the end of March, I remember one of the first reviews was, I wish there was more somatic practices.
Hmm.
And and that to me was like, man, again, it's not about the tools and the practices. It's about coming home to recognizing we have that innate capacity. And so in the book, I talk about what I call the 3 E's of using somatic practices, but also of feeling a feeling, how to process something somatically. And the 3 E's stand for experience, express, and expel.
Hmm.
And what we see a lot of right now is that people are jumping over the experiencing part, right? In
Yeah.
somatic experiencing, soma means of the body, we help people to better be with the experience of their body, to create a greater capacity to be in their body, both the good things and the things that don't feel so good. And so if any time we feel anxiety and we're like, oh, I can't experience this. I need to go straight to the somatic tool, straight to that nervous system work and get into the express and the expel portion. Because we're never taking time to sit with the experience in a way that feels tolerable, we're not creating a greater capacity to feel more and to feel more and to contain. The goal is not to use somatic tools for the rest of our lives. They're there to help us get back to baseline. And then we realize, okay, our bodies already have this natural capacity. So oftentimes people will ask me, what tools are you using today? And I do use a lot of tools, but the ones that I use are so simple.
Yeah.
Can I place a hand on my chest?
Yeah.
Can I just look at my children for a moment and co-regulate? Can I just take a pause, take a beat, and just look out at the clouds? And they're like, oh, it's that simple. And I'm like, yeah, I just go back
Yeah.
to the simplicity of things, So
I really relate to that, and I found and I'm curious if you relate to this, like, I found that when I was first learning, from scratch, from feeling like I was totally in the dark, and I was learning tools from other people, from books, from therapists, from courses, whatever.
I loved them at that point.
Oh, yeah, like, I needed to follow someone else's footsteps exactly and, like, practice by doing it the way that they did it, and then gradually over time, practicing how someone else does it. And then I was like, oh, I'm confident enough with this that I can improvise. And then, yeah, gradually it's like, I don't need a protocol. It's just like, yeah,
Mhm.
put a hand on my heart or, maybe do something completely different, like go
Yeah.
sit in a cafe because that feels good to me.
Well, and I think what that goes back to is that trust piece that you were talking about.
Yeah.
I at the beginning, I didn't trust my system enough because I hadn't had enough experiences of my body knowing how to move through these big moments, the grief that I hid away forever,
Yeah.
the shame that I carried for years and years, the anxiety that I had around abandonment. I wasn't able to sit with that. I don't know how to move through that sinking feeling in my chest and the I'm leaving my body right now. So I put my trust in people that I knew who had been there, who had walked that path.
Right.
And over time, consistently practicing those tools. I mean, I loved the tools at the beginning,
Mm.
but they were definitely someone else's. And then over time, when I had that confidence, as you said, I trusted myself to create tools of my own. And
Yeah.
so that's the sweet spot that I love to see people get into is not following the protocols, but finding what works for them just naturally.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Um, what I want to ask you about is so I'll just back this up a little bit, but it segues from what we're talking about. Um, After trauma, after a traumatic experience, oftentimes, our nervous system wants us to get really small and hide and self
Mhm.
isolate. And through your healing and growth process, you've been doing the opposite. You've been stepping into visibility in some, big ways that often feel very risky to the nervous system, writing a book, publishing a book, putting it out there into the world, you know, where it can be criticized by other people or received by other people.
Mhm.
You do speaking, you do teaching. What has that journey been like from a somatic lens, and how, if at all, do you apply the tools to that process?
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. And I feel like something that I've actually been navigating since the book process.
Yeah.
I've been in a very introspective place over the past few years and reflecting on what my life has been since 2010ish, we could say. And I didn't mention this at the when I was talking about some of my traumatic experiences, but I do think that my birth story has actually played a really big role in my life more than I ever expected. I didn't even know about my birth story until I was about 14 or 15 years old. And it wasn't something that I even saw as like traumatic. So I'm like, oh, I turned out okay. Until
Mm.
I started to do the deeper somatic work. And I was like, wow, that's a through line in so many of my experiences and so many of my patterns today. And so, just I guess some context there. When I was born, I was taken from my mother and put into foster care for a few months because there was methamphetamine found in her system. And in writing the book, I also learned because I interviewed a lot of the women in my family, including my mother. Um, I remember talking to my mom a little bit more about what it was like for her to be pregnant with me.
Mm.
And she was going through a very traumatic time. She was a young mom. She was 19 when she had me. and she had already had my brother at that point. He was almost 3 years older. And she was homeless when she was pregnant with me, living off of food stamps, living out of a car with my brother. And she didn't want to have a baby. I learned in writing the book. And it wasn't until she was 8 months pregnant that she said that she accepted
Mm.
that this pregnancy is going to happen. And so that's the reason why they actually, I think took our blood during the birth, because she hadn't had any pregnancy checkups. She
Yeah.
hadn't gone to see a doctor at all. And so there's always been this voice that's followed me around, this shadow for so long of you're not good enough. You need to prove yourself. No one wants you. This fear of not belonging. And now that I know what I know as a somatic experiencing practitioner, I know that all of that comes from my birth trauma and those experiences in my early years. The attachment wound, the detachment, the separation, the trauma that she experienced, and a lot of intergenerational trauma that was experienced by the women in my family line as well. And so, um, yeah, so it's interesting because I feel like my way of trying to find value or find love from others was to make myself big, was
Yeah.
to be on stages, was to put myself out there so that I couldn't be ignored. And so I feel like over the past 5 years since becoming a mother myself and in writing this book, oh my gosh, it was like therapy.
Oh,
Whew,
I
it
I
really
bet.
was such a
Yeah.
therapeutic process, yeah. Um, I'm realizing that I love my career and I love the work that I do, but I think for a long time, it was maybe performative.
Mm.
I knew that I was making a difference. I knew that I was helping people by talking about my story, by educating people, as a trauma informed educator. And I will do that. I always say now, like, I'll do it till the day that I die. It's work that I love. Um, but I do think that for some time, I was doing that work from a very dissociated place,
Mm.
very dissociated. And so yeah, all that to say, I'm kind of in a place now where I'm realizing that there's power in um, allowing myself to take up space in the way that feels really organic and natural and powerful to me, especially as a mother, as, a female business entrepreneur, as a survivor, but also feeling the power and allowing myself to not always be,
Yeah.
to not always have to puff up my chest, and that it's okay to rest and to not always be so loud. So, yeah, I'm leaning into both of those things and finding power in both of those aspects of my life, the softening and the puffing up, if that
I
makes sense.
really appreciate you sharing and describing that because I think, I had started off with like, well, often after trauma, like people shrink and they get quiet. And you're like, well, actually, it's kind of the opposite for me. And I think people often will see, one version of a story and think, well, what's wrong with me? I'm completely different.
Mm,
But I think the through thread, the way I see it anyway, is like when our system is in stress, the switch can get stuck, but it can get stuck on all the way on
yeah.
or all the way off, or kind of like flinging back and forth between those
Yes.
two. And it's challenging to modulate and find a rhythm.
Yeah, I mean, I pushed myself to such extremes to, find purpose out of my pain, which I really do believe in. I mean, I absolutely believe that what has happened to me has happened for me. I do believe that, and I know that for some people they might not feel that way, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I put myself in um, some pretty challenging environments. I mean, I was working in rape crisis centers overseas in conflict countries. I was
Mm.
doing work that I was probably not prepared to do in my mid 20s, all for the sake of, of course, making a difference. And this doesn't take away from the empathy and the mission that I always had.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the driver's seat part of me was, look at me, I am worthy. And I know Gabor Mate talks about that a lot, that his experience of, being given away by his mother during the Holocaust to a stranger to save his life, and his infant felt experience took that as, I'm not enough. And he talks about how he built this career around putting himself on this pedestal where he would be proven to be worthy and to be of value. And it doesn't take away from the incredible work that he's doing. But again, it just makes me really check in with myself. Anytime I say yes to something, anytime I say no, I am so much more intentional now around checking in with, is this something that brings joy to my life? Is this something that isn't done from a place of performance, but from a place of authentic want and desire? So yeah, I feel much more guided in that way.
And thanks for talking about that because I think this is just so relatable.
Mm.
I'd be shocked if there was a single listener who couldn't relate to this in their own way. I certainly relate to it. And I find that I'll learn kind of that lesson, I guess, over and over again in new contexts. It's like, oh, when I like part of the path that led me to the work I'm doing now was I had chronic migraine for like several years and recovered through a mind body approach. And, this relates to something we were talking about earlier. It's like I made the healing into a job. And at a certain point, I realized I was kind of gunning for a gold star. Like maybe
Mhm.
I'll be worthy if I heal
Yeah.
fast. It's
Yes.
like, oh, this is really not doing me any favors. Um, and then it'll crop up again in the next area where I'm
Yes.
growing. So you get to learn
Yeah.
it again.
And it does. And I think that's the important distinction, is that these patterns don't just go away, and
Yeah.
people are often like, how can I just make my anxiety go away or make this people pleasing part of me go away? And in the book, I love analogies. I use the analogy of a knight suit of armor. All these identities that we wear, that turns into this claustrophobic knight suit of armor that starts to turn into how other people see us and how we see ourselves. And it's not necessarily about doing away with the armor, but I say in the book, we melt it or meld it down into a shield, because every now and
Yeah.
then we need those parts of us, So, yeah. And I think it's also how you relate to those patterns when they come back up, meeting them with more
Yeah.
empathy, more understanding, rather than shaming or, oh, there, I'm doing it again.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
So,
Getting into the fight with ourselves again.
yeah.
We're winding down into the final 3 questions of this conversation. These are questions I ask every guest who comes on, and the first one is, if there is I mean, this has been woven through everything you've said, but if there is a soapbox message that you feel really passionate about spreading through all the work you're doing, what would that message be?
Mm. Yeah, I feel like I've said all of those. Um,
It doesn't have to be something new. We can just come back to one of them.
yeah, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with a little bit of repetition to really
Yeah,
point it home, but I think again that, we have all the answers that we've been looking for, um, and that, um, our body is not working against us, it's actually working for us, and that when we really resist that survival mode that we've gotten stuck in and take time to be with the stillness and to be with the pause of life rather than the push of life,
yeah.
that's where things can really start to, I think, unfold and really blossom.
To me, those messages are deeply settling, especially the first thing you said, "We have all the answers we've been looking for." There's
Yeah.
just something so, like a sigh of relief in that message.
Yeah, well, and I maybe I'll add to that too. I don't, you know, you know this somatic experiencing in our definition is that it's a naturalistic approach to trauma recovery, and I always highlight that word in these
Right.
conversations, naturalistic, because we are tethered to nature, and I think sometimes we forget that.
We do.
Yeah, and I am of the belief that nature doesn't give us anything that it doesn't already have a solution for, that doesn't have some kind of healing for. And so just recognizing and remembering that we were built as an organism to regenerate, to reorganize,
Yeah.
and to come back regenerative, even stronger than before. And that's that post traumatic growth part. I think sometimes holding on to that, even when we don't believe it, can be really helpful.
Agreed. It's just me. Our backyard is like right outside the window of the room I'm in, and it's making me think of this tree that's growing like with the chain link fence that separates our yard from the neighbor's yard is like
Oh,
inside the tree, and
that's amazing.
it's flourishing, whether we want it to be there or not. Um, what words of encouragement do you have for the listener who's maybe seeing some of their own experience in the earlier parts of your healing story, who's perhaps thinking like, "Oh, I really need to do some somatic work myself," but maybe they're also scared of like, what is it going to feel like? How long is it going to take? Where do I even begin? What words of encouragement would you offer that person?
Yeah, I would say that if you're going to work with a somatic experiencing practitioner in general, the foundation of our work and our modality is that we practice this concept called titration. And it's these slow, gentle, tolerable, this is always the language that we use, baby steps that we take towards healing. And so, if it's something that you're interested in, just know that you won't be thrown into the deep end. We always say we like to walk you into the shallow end so that you can start to learn how to tread, how to float on your back, how to use floaties, right? Before we get into the deeper work. And so, somatic experiencing should never feel overwhelming. It should never feel out of control. It should feel contained, supportive, and gentle. And so, that's maybe an encouragement I would give for anyone who's looking to do this work.
Yeah, I think again, it's very orienting
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And finally, where can people find you and your work? How can they connect to you? Can they reach out to you to work with you? Let us know.
Yeah. So you can find me on social media. I do a lot of social. I dabble in social media. So you can find me at Heal with Brit with 2 T's, either on Instagram or on TikTok. I'm on TikTok too, and on YouTube, and I think even Pinterest. But so you can find me on different social media platforms where I love providing a lot of educational content. Like I said, I'm just a nerd. So I love giving context, little bite-sized lessons on somatic healing, the nervous system, and just healing in general. And I share a lot about my own unfiltered life, just because I feel like that can be helpful to see the human side of healing. And if you're interested in working with me, I work with clients through the Body First Healing Program. It's a live group program, and it's a 6-month long trauma somatic healing recovery program. And to learn more about that or the book, you can just go to bodyfirsthealing.com.
Fantastic. And I'll put all those things in the show notes, of course, so folks can find you easily and reach out and connect and grab your book. Britt, thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you for the incredible work that you do. Thank you for writing this gorgeous book. It's a
Yay.
pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. This was really, really, really nice. So I appreciate the conversation.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.